I spent much of my early career studying women's sexual psychology and specifically what are some of the contexts that lead women to pursue one type of mating strategy versus another. And I was really into that work. I published some work looking at women's fluctuating hormones over the course of the menstrual cycle and how that influences motivational states, and particularly women's orientation toward mating and sex. And I didn't really spend a whole lot of time thinking about the birth control pill specifically until I went off of it, because I had been on it for more than a decade. And after I went off of it, within a couple of months, I noticed that I felt different. And I felt like I had more energy. I was finding that I was going to the gym again in a really long time. I was downloading new music on my phone, listening to, and I was just like things that brought me pleasure. I was like really into things that brought me pleasure or things that were like stimulating my nervous system. I was interested in sex in a way that I hadn't been in a while. And I just felt more alive. And I just felt more deeply human. It was like everything had more amplitude than I felt like it did when I was on the pill. Like when I was on the pill, I felt like everything was kind of a black and white grayscale of life. And then when I went off of it, I started to realize I was just feeling more three-dimensional, and everything just felt deeper and richer than it did when I was off of it or when I was on it. And I didn't really, I was like, that's kind of interesting. And I didn't, really spend a whole lot more time thinking about it other than like, isn't that interesting? Until about a year after I had sort of had the realization that I felt different off the pill compared to on it. I was at a research conference, and my colleague and friend was talking about some of his research looking at the effects of early life trauma on the functioning of the stress response in adults. And so he's just looking at, does childhood trauma affect how you respond to stress? And as he was presenting his results, as he was beginning to explain the methods for, the data collection and analysis, he had mentioned that he had only analyzed the data from the men in his sample. And he explained the reason for this was that most of the women that they collected data on were on hormonal birth control. And everybody knows that women on hormonal birth control don't have a cortisol response to stress. And then he kind of went on and talked about, what he found in his study. But my brain just lit on fire at that. I was like, women on hormonal birth control don't have a cortisol response to stress. Like, that's odd. And then I was like, well, it's also odd that I felt so different when I was, when I went off of
Yeah.
it compared